Welcome to Design to Move, a weekly functional movement series reviewing common movement impairment syndromes, muscle imbalances, and injury cycles and how to correct for them. Don't just exercise, but restore optimal movement.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Design to Move. My name is Ryan Maxwell, this is Ryan Parr. We're two movement specialists here, and we're gonna go over rounded shoulder posture. This is another issue that plagues a lot of us because we sit behind a desk, we do all the things out in front of our body, and we overuse certain muscle groups that pull our shoulders forward. Now, unfortunately, that offsets our center of mass, creates postural issues up and down the kinetic chain, into our neck, into our shoulders. So today we're gonna wanna show you how to reduce all of this through a handful of stretching exercises and activation exercises to get the muscles to start to rebalance themselves and to restore your posture. If you have questions on the topic, you can reach out to us at admin@fluidhealthandfitness.com. We do write a blog on the topic, it's in the description below. Make sure to take a look at that. It has lots more information about what we're going over today. And then we do have a table of contents to the side with timestamps of the sections of our video with a condensed version at the bottom. That way you can get right to it if you want to review it after you've gone through the whole video a couple times. Let's get right into our first section. First segment is going to be on mobility and release. These are the overactive muscles associated with rounded shoulders. This is going to be the pec minor and the teres major. There's more than those guys, but those are the ones we're going to focus on today. First muscle we're going to target is the teres major. Now, the teres is not technically one of the rotator cuff muscles, although it does rotate the humerus, right, or the upper arm bone. It's actually on the bottom side of the attachment points of the scapula. So a lot of times people confuse it as a rotator, but really it's not. So if I trace Ryan's scapula down to the apex, that little inferior ridge at the bottom of his scapula, and start to roll around the inside or lateral border of his scap, I'll be able to push in and feel the muscle actually flex if he rotates his arm inward and back. So pretty easy to identify where it's at. Now again, it could be the lat that you're feeling because it's right underneath of it, or it could be even the tricep attachment coming over top. So you're gonna wanna play with it a little bit by getting that ball into that area. And as soon as you start to do what we're gonna show you here, a pin and stretch, if you bring your arm up overhead into flexion and rotate your wrist into extension, the opposite of the muscle action, you'll start to feel it floss through the pressure of the ball. Okay, so that's a good indication you're in the right area. Hard to describe. We have a little picture here that shows you what we're looking for, so hopefully that'll help you to identify it. But again, if you flex the muscle by it internally rotating and pulling the arm back and palpating, you'll feel it bulge. Again, just don't mistake it for the lat, okay? We call it the mini lat because it actually acts in the same action, okay? So Ryan's gonna get into the wall. He's using a lacrosse ball to get the muscle to release. We're doing a pin and stretch technique. This is an active release technique to help the muscle to relax and to lengthen. So he's gonna start by getting his body into a state of gait, where his back leg, he's gonna be on the left side, is gonna be behind him. Now, in gait, your arm would come out in front of you and you would bring the arm into horizontal adduction. Now, again, I would supinate the palm or rotate it up towards the ceiling as I'm going through that position and lift the arm overhead, okay? And that's what we're gonna do to stretch through that belly of the muscle. So Ryan's gonna breathe in, pull his arm up, rotate the palm to the ceiling, and Ryan, do you feel that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you'll feel that stretch and then come back down. Now, if again, it's overused and you bring that arm up, again, it may have a tendency to wanna pull it forward. So if you really are exhibiting that forward shoulder posture where it's rolled in and you come up like that and you're putting more tension on that overly top muscle, you may even feel it as a pinching in the acromion because the space is actually being depressed, right, or compressed. So you may not want to bring it up very high. So while we're showing you a pretty elongated version of the stretch, it may be much more subtle or smaller for you. So what we would want to do is roll the arm up into flexion with the palm facing up till you get to that natural in-cat range of motion where you feel that tension, and then breathe out and sink back into the belly of the muscle, hopefully seeing that there's an increase in passive tone so the ball can get deeper into the belly of the muscle. We'd go through multiple sequences, 6 to 10, and you should start to see your arms getting a little bit higher each time. After you've gotten through that, you do the opposite side and then get into our next stretch. The next little guy that we're gonna target is the pec minor. We've done this a lot, but it's a troublesome muscle and it's chronically overused because it's one of the respiratory muscles. And again, it lays underneath the bigger muscle, pec major. It attaches from the acromion of the scapula and comes down to the 3rd to 5th rib. Okay, so it comes down as a diagonal and it's a little triangle. So if you palpate your fingers back and forth, medial to lateral, by pushing into the pec major, you'll start to feel a little ridge. We're gonna place the ball there. And again, this is about retracting and depressing the scapula back. It's not so much about the humerus moving the arm because the motion happens at the shoulder. Again, the actual scapula moves in and back. And that's what we're gonna use to stretch. So we're placing the ball into that little socket. Ryan, you figured out where that minor is, right? He's gonna step forward into the same leg. He's leveraging his body weight almost diagonally into the wall so he can get some pressure into the ball. And the focal point here is not really arm movement so much as it is scapular depression and retraction. Depression meaning it's coming back posteriorly, and then retraction meaning it's coming lateral to medial towards the spine. So what he's gonna do is he's gonna push into that ball until he feels some pressure into the muscle. He's gonna wait for the body to relax, for the muscle to relax its tone. And then as he breathes in, he's gonna release that arm, pull the scapula back around his rib cage. He'll feel the muscle floss between the pressure of the ball and his ribs, and then breathe out and then sink into the belly of the muscle. Breathe in, roll it back. You'll notice he's bringing his other arm into horizontal flexion, and then breathing out and sinking back into that belly. Each, again, subsequent iteration will give that muscle a little bit more length, and a little more extension, and it'll be softer each time he sinks back into that muscle. And it's gonna, again, help to restore the placement of the scapula on the rib cage in its fixed position so that the shoulders don't move forward, okay? So that's good, right? Once again, you would wanna do about 6 to 10 of these breathing patterns with the pen and stretch. You'll notice, again, the muscle's gonna get a little bit softer each time. You would do both sides of the body, and then we're gonna get right into our activation. Second segment is called activation. These are the little guys that need to be strengthened that oppose the muscles that we just stretched out. In this case, we're going to be working on the stabilization of the scapula and external rotators, teres minor and infraspinatus. So this next exercise is going to be isolating the muscles that stabilize our shoulder blades while rotating the humerus externally in a fixed joint center. So a lot of times our muscles are overused, and the ones that we just reduced, the minor, pec minor, and the teres major, they're internal rotators of the humerus, but not the external rotators. They're weak and deficient. Now, we also want to know that the joint center that the humerus fits in should be in a fixed and stable position before we even move that humerus in the socket. So what we're going to work on is retraction of the scapula without hyperextension of the lower back. So oftentimes we replace the glide of the scapula with the lower back extension while rotating the humerus to our in-cap ranges of motion. Now, a lot of times people, when they do this movement, and Ryan's going to be using an orange band, and you guys can do the same from home, it's about 2 to 3 pounds of tension. You don't need a lot. These externals are pretty weak, right? Yeah. So you're gonna get fatigued with that little band. But point is, what they'll do is they'll start moving their shoulders instead of retracting and depressing the shoulder and then rotating the humerus in the joint, or they'll start to do lateral delt raises where they'll start to bring their arms up or extend the elbows out using their triceps. Again, these are all compensation mechanisms because they're trying to avoid using these little guys that are normally fatigued and weak, and so they burn out pretty quick. Okay, so these are all things that you're gonna wanna watch out for and manage. It may help you to get your back up on a vertical axis by standing up against a wall. Okay, but for today, we're just gonna show you how to do it upright. So Ryan's gonna grab this band. It's gonna be about 18 to 20 inches or about the tension at the width of his torso. He's gonna retract his shoulders back. He's gonna get his head to glide back so it's neutral. His head's in line with his rib line. Now he's gonna get his ribs to contract by depressing them down with his breath. Breathe in, retract the scapula back, and then he's gonna externally rotate by moving the humerus away from the midline of the body, and then come back to the midline. So again, the lower portion of his arm is gonna rotate out away from the midline and then bring his arm back. Now all the while, he's gonna make sure that the tension's on the band so that the muscle's under a state of contraction the whole entire time. So what we're gonna look out for is, again, shrugging as we pull the arms open. So we wouldn't wanna see that. We don't wanna see the head start to kick forward into excess kyphosis. We won't want to see the neck start to kick up, going into extra extension. And you don't want to see your hips shift forward. So a lot of times people will buckle in their knees and shift their hips forward too. All indicators that your body's trying to leverage compensation patterns that might be inherent with this issue with the rounded shoulder, right? So we're gonna do 2 sets of 20 repetitions. You'll notice that Ryan did a nice strong contraction with a slow closure of that internal rotation. So it takes about 2 minutes to get through all 20 reps. It's gonna burn, so for those of you with an excessive internal rotated shoulder, you're gonna probably wanna split that up into a couple segments. But all said and done, you would wanna get through 2 sets of 20 repetitions. Try to give yourself a minute of time in between. You may be fatigued in the beginning, but over a couple sessions, couple weeks, you may see that you'll see a noticeable increase in the strength over time. So that brings us to the end of that. We're gonna get into our next segment. The second to last segment is on integration. We're basically teaching you how to move through multiple joint centers to coordinate the muscular firing patterns that's gonna help to create efficient movement and posture. In this case, we're gonna get you into a 4-point position where we work on your breathing mechanics along with scapular retraction. This next exercise is going to teach you how to engage your glute and the scapular retractors that allow your body to get into the right position as we go through gait. Now, a lot of times when people walk, they step through their stride with their lead leg into hip extension and the opposite arm is going to come back. But when they bring the arm back, they're actually initiating through the arm and not the scapular retraction. What we want to think about is stabilizing our midsection and then the adjoining segments that attach our appendages to our body by initiating the muscles that help to support the adjoining segment, in this case, the rhomboids, the lower mid-trapezius, and the external rotators of the humerus, okay? So bottom line is, as I step forward in my left leg, and I come through my stride into extension, I'm going to retract and depress my shoulder back as I glide the humerus in the socket and rotate the arm around my torso, okay? Now that's, again, a functional range of motion that's gonna help to allow you to engage what's called your posterior oblique sling in an efficient way where all the muscles line up the right way, okay? So we're gonna put this into isolation in a horizontal position using a dumbbell to basically create the force that we need to engage those muscles in that way, okay? So Ryan's gonna get down into a kneeling position, and he's gonna kick his left leg behind him, so we're gonna be initiating the left gluteal into extension. So he's gonna flex his left glute, his hips extended on the left. Now, what we're trying to do, again, is maintain a nice neutral spinal alignment so that the base of his skull is in line with his ribs, in line with his SI, or where the pelvis meets up with the spine. Now, his hips are right over his knees, and his palms are right underneath of his shoulders. He's gonna push through by first engaging his abdominals to stabilize the spine, breathe in through his thorax or his rib cage to create more pressure, and then he's going to take his right arm, pull the scapula back around the rib cage, retract it, and subtly externally rotate the palm so that it faces forward away from him. Then he's gonna breathe out and slowly bring his opposite scapula back into retraction and maintain the depression of his rib cage as he comes down. Goal here is to teach you how to stabilize the thorax or the midsection, the rib cage, while the scapula on both sides of the body rotate around the torso. In this case, the left arm would go into protraction and external rotation or internal rotation, and the right arm would go into retraction with external rotation. And this is, again, the gait cycle as you would step forward. Now, learning that natural carrying angle for the arm movement with the adjoining segment being stable around the shoulder blade and maintaining the abdominal and thoracic pressure is going to help to align your body to avoid injury cycles and, again, movement distortions that show up just like that rounded shoulder position. So what we want to do is go through about 20 repetitions, again, 2 sets. Give yourself about a minute in between. If you start to fatigue in the shoulder and notice that your shoulder starts to shrug as you start to come back into retraction, you start to see your hip line become asymmetrical or drop down towards the floor, you're going to want to stop there. And again, always give yourself permission to take a little break in between if you need to do multiple sets to get up to that volume over the course of multiple sessions. Go ahead and do so. We want to see you accomplish it with the right precision and not just get through the motion. Don't forget to do both sides, and let's move on. Last segment is on strength. This is going to be a hip hinge with a pull through with a band. We want to put all the pieces together by teaching you how to retract the scapula, allow the arm to glide through the glenoid fascia and be able to create central stabilization around the pelvis, lumbar spine, and thoracic. Let's get into it. So we're going to finish off with the last movement that's going to coordinate the retraction and depression of our shoulder blade with the co-contraction of the arm muscles that pull the arms into extension and externally rotate, basically bringing us to that end cap of the range of motion that we practiced with the external rotation with the band. Now what we want to do is learn how to coordinate that action while putting pressure into the muscles that attach the pelvis to the upper body, in this case the lats, as they learn how to stabilize both the pelvis and the shoulders collectively. So even though this is a strength movement, you could still consider it an integration movement as well. So what Ryan's going to do is first get his shoulders down and back. He wants to retract and depress. He's fixing those shoulders around, again, a depressed rib cage, so he's not hyper-ascending. He's holding his abdominal pressure. Now he's going to go down into a squat. So he's going to put his hips behind him. He wants equal bend in the ankles, knees, and hips. Now at the bottom of that movement, he's going to draw his arms up, but as he does that, he's going to let his shoulder blade glide back posteriorly around the ribs as he lifts his arms up straight ahead in front of him. So go ahead and give it a shot, Ryan. He's going to glide his scaps back and lift the arms up. By gliding the scapula backward, it creates extra spacing so that the humeral head doesn't compress or again hit into the bony block of the AC joint. At the top of the movement, he's going to breathe out, push his hips forward into extension, go into terminal knee extension, depress his shoulders, and retract his shoulder blades again around that nice fixed rib cage. Again, inflating through the ribs as he breathes in, holding the abdominals into contracture so that the ribs don't go into ascension, and then come back down into a squat with the arms ahead. Now, the goal here once more is to see if you can keep your shoulders from rotating forward or shrugging when the pressure of the lats, which attach down at the thoracolumbar fascia on your back, go into a state of stretch or contracture because they're trying to help stabilize the pelvis. That's when you're going to see the shoulders start to shrug. So Ryan, give them an example of that at the bottom of the squat. So you're trying to teach your body to resist that tension and hold that fixed posture through the shoulders so that our body knows how to go and stabilize the joints as they again respond to different influences. Okay, so we're going to come down slowly, initiate that posterior glide of the scapula, lift the arm up into flexion, breathe out, come back, abduct the arms away from the midline, retract and depress the shoulders, and again, make sure the head is on line right over the top of the spine. Very good, Brian. And he has a nice stable joint center to be able to control the appendage movement. So if you guys are long and lanky, this is something that you're really going to want to focus on. You need a more intrinsic joint control because your lever length is there. Not only will it help with your pulls and your rows, but also pushes, bench press, you name it, anything through the shoulder. So keep after it. You're going to do 2 sets of 20 repetitions one more time, working in a time limit tension. That's going to help with those intrinsic stabilizers. Give yourself a minute of time in between, and then that would bring us to the end of the segment. All right, Ryan, that brings us to the end of another episode of Design to Move. Remember, this was on forward shoulder posture or rounded shoulder posture. It had to do with the positioning of the scapula and the way that the humerus or the upper arm bone fits into the socket of the scapula. Now, either the muscles that pull the shoulders forward are too tight, like your pec minor and the teres major that we talked about, or it could be bigger muscle groups like your pec major or lats or even upper traps. So these are all relationships that play into other postural deviations or distortions. And if you want more information, we have all sorts of video tutorials on those other issues or areas. So make sure to take a look at those videos as well and understand how to put all the pieces together. So once again, we do have a blog on the topic listed in the description. If you want more information on the details of what we went over today, make sure to read that. And join us again for another episode of Design to Move next week, where we're going to go into another issue on a common movement distortion. As we always say, your body's designed to move, stay in motion. So we'll see you next week for another episode.